Hello, welcome to the Authentic Role-Playing Podcast, featuring independent DMs and GMs of tabletop role-playing games. My name is Alexis Smolensk, and I'm coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, in Western Canada. And today I'm talking to Mike Borthwick, who is also in Calgary today. Mike is the creator of Do Done Drink, the link for which you can find in the description below. Mike has been an old friend of mine for years and has once played a bit in my campaign. Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Good. I actually got to sit at your table twice now.
Oh, well, there we go.
Each less successful than the last, I should say.
We didn't really quite see eye to eye, did we?
No, not so much, no. Yeah. But maybe that makes me an ideal candidate to be on your show here. So.
I think it does. I think it's perfect. I am certainly not the only viewpoint, and best to go at somebody else who doesn't agree with me.
Yeah. So I think that kind of makes you a lot braver than a lot of the other podcasts that I listen to online, where it just seems like some hubris, mutual mental masturbation happening.
Oh, God, I love being disagreed with.
I know you do.
So the podcast is going to be a little bit different today because Mike hasn't played a role-playing game in, how long has it been?
Probably 15 years.
Okay.
I've sat in a couple since then, just as a one-time thing. In fact, twice. One was your game, and one was run by another friend of mine. And as a serious regular player, it's probably been 15 years. Yeah.
There was a time you were a serious regular player.
Yeah.
How?
All the way from high school, grade 12, all the way through 8 years of post-secondary education, and probably semi-sporadically for about 5 years after that.
How much of a fanatic were you?
I had all of it. Every single book. I had 2 bookcases full of absolutely everything. Yeah. Second edition, first ed, original. I had all 3 boxes. I had multiple other games as well. I was huge into Shadowrun. I even invented my own role-playing game at one point called Carfaro, which I published and sold for over the course of about a year. Yeah.
So what happened?
There was a shift, I think, in my perspective when it came to the difference between being serious about it and being casual about it. I found that when I was serious about it, I could bring a lot more energy and attention to details. But somewhere along the line, other things started to become more important. And so the priority that I placed on D&D and role-playing in general, specifically at the time I was running a cyberpunk campaign. I think it was a homebrew system even at the time. And it took up less and less time, and I kind of slowly faded away from the seriousness of it and started to become more casual about it. And in becoming more casual about it, I think my mind shifted. And what I wanted to get out of the game became more, I wanted to have a little bit more fun rather than competition, if that makes any sense.
Because it was too heavy-handed?
No, it wasn't that it was heavy-handed. I think it's just what I wanted to get out of the game wasn't the win. I didn't go into a game thinking we're going to go and we're going to try and beat this scenario that the DM is putting in front of us. We're not going in to try and get all the gold at the end of clearing a dungeon or what other perplexing, stereotypical process can you possibly wrap the concept of a win around in a role-playing game, right?
Yeah.
So it ceased being so much about winning, and it came out to just, if I'm going to do something for 5 hours on a Saturday night, I'm going to go in, I'm going to have as much fun as I possibly can, and I'm going to go home probably drunk, and full of snacks and having had a good time with a smile on my face. And the win was, it didn't matter at all anymore at that point. And consequently, I became a huge raging distraction for anybody who was trying to play serious, anybody who was trying to take it and get that win, because I was no longer participating in their efforts to get the win. You know what I mean?
The basic premise of the game that you're there to accumulate things, that just ceased to hold you.
It did. I talk a lot in gaming circles about the current game that I've built, about the difference between competitive gaming and just, casual gaming. You can go and you can find chess players playing chess competitively in the park. You won't go and find casual people who want to play chess enjoying that scenario. You're not going to find a casual chess player who wants to put $20 down on a Saturday afternoon and play speed chess against a pro.
Yeah.
And so for me, the perspective on D&D and tabletop gaming in general, it shifted from going for the win and being serious about it and having the entire second edition Dungeon Master's Guide programmed in my head that I could recall at a moment's notice and know exactly which page and what row of which table that I wanted in Appendix G.
Well, it's interesting, the connection between an amateur mindset and a professional mindset. Is there any games that you play now that you're competitive at?
So one game that I would say, no, see, right now, no. Even then, I used to be pretty competitive into StarCraft as well, and I'm not at all anymore. I'd be lucky if I hit bronze at this point, let alone diamond where I used to be. But I haven't played in, I don't even know if it's installed on my computer right now.
Well, you play poker.
I do, but even then, the rules that I have set up for poker, we call them the Freak House rules. Every single rule that's in there is designed specifically to create a casual atmosphere and a casual game, not a competitive one. So you can have micro moments of competition, but at the end of those micro moments, there's still a sense of camaraderie because the amount that you're losing is capped. For example, we got rid of all side betting. As soon as somebody goes all in, that's it. They're all in. We do it tournament style in the sense that you can't continually buy in. We did that so that it would keep people with large bankrolls from pushing off smaller bankroll people. We even got rid of the buy-in in the sense that instead of trying to buy in, everyone brings a wrapped gift. And then we do a reverse gift exchange. So the first person out of the game, they pick their gift first. And the last person, the person who wins, gets to pick out of all the unwrapped gifts in the room or go for the last wrapped gift. So even then, the sense of competition is removed from pretty much all of the games that I play because I'm a casual player, not a competitive player.
Do you think that this is a common experience with people who leave or give up role-playing games?
From my experience, and I look back at the 3 static groups that I played with, because we also played Dungeons & Dragons Online, 3D MMO version. We played that online for about 4 years with a static group. And I wouldn't say we were hardcore, but we weren't casual, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't play with them anymore. All of our lives kind of drifted apart, and it became harder and harder to make the time on a Saturday night to play the game. Same with tabletop. The people that I used to play with, they've all moved off. And they've started families, and they're focused on their careers more. And other things have taken the place of going for the win in the game when they're going for the win in their life.
What kind of experiences do you think that you would need to have to go back to any kind of role-playing game? What kind of group of people would you need?
Well, I would be looking for a casual group, somebody who is playing for fun. We used to do a one-shot called Monty Hall, Haul. It was based on the Monty Hall character from Let's Make a Deal.
Yeah.
And that's how we would build our characters. And we would come up with whatever crazy, ridiculous feature, attribute, or magical weapon or armor that we could possibly dream of. But then we'd have to make a deal with the DM, who would then try to seek balance by providing us with some kind of ridiculous backstory, hunchback, can't walk, one peg leg, kind of ridiculous kind of characters. And we just did it for shits and giggles, and it was good fun, and it was a laugh. And so I would probably be looking for something like that. I would also switch away from ROL playing to ROLE playing, in the sense that I am trained in improv theater, improv comedy, and theater sports. And for me to act out in a way that gets a laugh is probably a personal reward for me. So I'd be looking for a table where I could do that and not be a distraction from people who are going for the win.
Would you call it a game, however, if that was the case?
See, there's a very difference of opinion in what creates a game. A game where you play to win, yes, that's one type of game. A game where you play to have fun, yes. It's another type of game. I spent an entire year, actually, working through different types of scenarios and playing games where I did nothing but cheat. But I didn't cheat in favor of me, and I didn't cheat in the sense that I broke the rules. I cheated in the sense that my win wasn't actually about winning the game. What I would take away and call as a win would be something completely irrelevant and usually external to the game, and that was probably the last time I had some serious fun just playing games on a tabletop. So I can wrap it around. You asked if the difference between competitive games and casual games. The game that I created is a drinking game. You can imagine it's not competitive.
Yeah, well, sort of not competitive at some point.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. I mean, like it doesn't even matter what's in your glass, to be honest with you. Like you can have milk in there. It doesn't have to be alcohol.
Yeah.
It's that kind of a drinking game. The challenge in that sense and the win in that sense was actually originally to create a drinking game that the designated driver could also play and have fun. And so it was always meant to be a casual game and not a competitive game. I switched gears 15, 18 years ago, somewhere around there, I guess. And this was one of the games that I came up with back then, and I'm only just now finally finding the time to design it, put the website together, build a mailing list, create the business, and do all of that stuff. And so now that my idea of a win, where a game is concerned, is to sell it and watch other people have shitloads of fun and giggles and laughs, and it's not so much about memorizing stat tables and being able to create a character on the fly in under 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well,
without even looking at a book.
People are going to wonder, do you miss it? I mean, they're going to want me to ask that question. Do you miss roleplay?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I miss roleplay both casually and competitively. If I had an opportunity to play in like twice a month and for about 4 hours a session with a DM and a group of people who were open to playing a particular style and a particular genre at the same time, yeah, I could get behind that. Yeah, but I don't have the time for that. I do 60 hours a week as it is.
Well, I think that a lot of my listeners who are playing, I think there's a deep-seated fear somewhere in there that they're going to come to some point in their lives when they won't have enough time to play, or they won't be able to find the people. What would you tell them from your perspective?
I've had some pretty decent luck playing online using a couple of different tools. It makes it a lot easier to find people to play with. Playing in person at this age, I also have to calculate drive times because we live in a city of 1.5 million people, and it's freaking huge. And I've got friends who play who are scattered. Well, shoot, for me to get to your house by car even would be 40 minutes. And I've got friends who live in small suburban towns just outside of Calgary. So for me to get there would be 50 minutes. So that's 50 there, 50 back. That's almost 2 hours just in drive time to go play for 4 hours, which seems ridiculous. But if we can get online, we can play via Skype, and we can play with a couple of tools. I forget the name of them offhand because I haven't used them in forever, but that might work.
I thought you might say something like you just get so busy you don't really have time to miss it.
No, I get busy, yes, but there's periods of time in the chaos, when I'm sitting there on a Thursday night wondering, what kind of trouble can I get into this weekend? And then I'm reminded, I'm 46 years old. I've got a 6-year-old son, a wife. I've got 3 businesses that I'm bootstrapping myself. And then I think, okay, I can find 45 minutes on Saturday night between 8:15 and 9 o'clock where I can play a first-person shooter game, and chances are I'm going to get so frustrated because I suck at first-person shooters because there is no other win except to win in that game, right? It's
that's designed
very competitive.
That's designed for kids who have 80 hours a week to practice.
Yeah, and it is designed completely for a win. So I generally get demotivated and quit out of frustration at the fact that I can't compete against 12-year-olds, their reaction times.
Okay, well, there's another aspect of the gameplay that you haven't talked about, and that's the skill at playing.
this skill at playing.
Do you believe in such a thing?
I have been incredibly fortunate in my experiences of playing Dungeons and Dragons on the tabletop to have some crazy good dungeon masters running things. And I know that you don't generally support pre-purchase modules. And one of the things that I always appreciated was my DMs would generally start with a pre-purchase module and then see where it goes from there. And then they would freehand the rest of the adventure based on the material that was in the book. And they were very, very, very good at keeping these problems stitched together. And even sometimes when it was necessary, they could add new ones in. And they would give us this world that we could play against without feeling like we were playing against them. And I always thought that they were freaking geniuses when it came to that. I played at your table, and you're very good at that too, I have to say.
No praise. I have to cut it out.
As a side note, you were good at that. It was good. So I was always very lucky in doing that. Whenever I ran it, I always tried to do the same thing. I always tried to bring the challenge. And it wasn't usually just one challenge. It was always there has to be 3 challenges, because there's the one that's immediately in front of the party that they need to solve. There's the one that one leads to that you probably have already prepared. And then there's the 3rd challenge that's just beyond that. That's just a trickle in the back of your head, and you're trying to put it together. And so when you come back as a player and you're playing with somebody who can do all of these things and who can run all of these things and who can get you jumping through crazy hoops that you have to solve, when you get through them all, and there's that sense of accomplishment and you get that win, and that is valuable. And I definitely miss that aspect about playing the game.
But the aspect of skill in terms of being a more skillful role player, ROLE, as you say, being more skillful at recognizing or intuiting problems that are coming up, not necessarily for the win, but just for the dopamine fix of being able to answer the problem. Did the dopamine fix just fail you?
Creative problem solving drives me personally in everything that I do. I got into software development because it allows me to solve problems creatively using a different type of tool set. Seeing them coming, solving those problems, it's really unique and interesting what role-playing can do in both senses of the word. You have some very creative tools that you can use to solve very interesting problems that no other game will allow you. I mean, I can't role-play my way out of a problem in a first-person shooter on a video game. I can't do that. To most RPG games that you can play online, you can't really role-play yourself out of them. I mean, yeah, you can click on different story paths and you can choose different directions, but it's not the same thing as role-playing. It's not the same thing as looking across the table at your DM and pretending that you're a paladin. Or one of my favorite examples was I was playing a lawful good paladin, and I got into an argument with a swashbuckler type character who wanted to torture somebody that we just had, and it became this big role-playing festival of he and I going at it for about 7 minutes, arguing about no, you can't, yes, you can't, no, you can't, yes, you can't. But we did it in this space, and I've always admired him when he does improv comedy and when he does acting. He's a much more serious actor than I am.
Yeah.
But for him to take on that character and to be that character in that time and in that place, the room was silent and people were laughing when they should be laughing, and the scene folded out, and it was like theater in the living room for an audience of 6, and it was brilliant, and it was absolutely fascinating, and I loved it.
A lot of people think that because I'm such a number crunch guy in my game that I'm not a role player, or that I don't advocate that much ROLE playing at my table. But I used to be in theater, so I'm all for that. I don't see the game as being either role playing or role playing. I see it as both, and that they mesh together. But there's something I want to talk to you about, and I don't know if I want to put it off anymore.
Okay.
You write code, yeah?
Yep.
That's you've done that for a living for a while now.
I've written code professionally for 15 years. I started writing code at the age of 10 in 1982.
Coincidence that you started writing code professionally about the same time that you gave up role-playing.
Yep. I switched to follow my career.
Yeah. So I've been making an argument here and there that one of the benefits, the strongest benefit that role-playing tabletop has over role-playing in a video game is that you can reprogram the game while you're playing the game in role-playing.
Yes.
Right? You don't have to write code.
Yes.
You can have 3 people decide to change the rules or the parameters of the game in any way that you desire. It doesn't even have to be within, some sort of... As long as everybody at the table agrees, you can reprogram the game as you're playing it. Yes.
Yeah, and any good DM or GM will be able to take that and not get upset by the fact that the 3 months they spent carefully crafting a storyline just got thrown out the window because the party decided that they didn't want to go down a back alley and investigate some screams. It's a bad neck of town. They're all level 1. They're not going to go down a back alley to.
But that's not necessarily a defect, right? I mean, that's an aspect of the game that's actually a plus.
When you do improv comedy on the theater and you're in front of an audience of 120 and somebody asks you if you want to go down the dark alley and investigate some screams, you say yes, because that's danger, and where there's danger, there's comedy, and where there's conflict, there's comedy, and so you're always saying yes, and you're always pursuing these things. But when it comes down to a party, especially of rookie players, who don't understand that they can make the choice to completely screw with whatever the DM may have already prepared for that evening, let's say, or if they pre-purchased a module and you decide that you don't want to go into Waterdeep, you're going to go 180 degrees down the highway the other way.
Yeah.
Well, why did you just spend $100 on buying the box set for Waterdeep?
Well,
so there's...
what my feelings are. Don't spend $100. Don't buy Waterdeep. Now, somebody that I've been influenced by in the last year is a fellow by the name of Ian Bogost, who is a game theoretician with the University or the Institute of Technology in Georgia. He doesn't talk about tabletop gaming. He talks about the influences and changes of video gaming. And a lot of the problems that he has with video gaming is that it's not flexible enough. Do you think that video gaming has something to learn from tabletop gaming, and how would you approach a traditional game designer with that solution? Take your time on
So
that.
now you're touching into a couple of different areas that really get home for me. I started making my own games as soon as I started writing code. I thought it would be a lot more fun to make a video game than it would be to actually just, spend 60, 80, 100 hours playing one. And as it turned out, I did get more enjoyment out of making them. So I have been making video games since my first line of code, which was a really crappy boxing betting thing based on an old video game called Lemonade Stand. And it was horrible. ASCII graphics. It was bad, and the code was bad, and there were spelling mistakes because I was 10, and, it was not great. But I had been making video games ever since. I used to work for a company where my entire job was to create games online for various companies. I don't want to plug that right now. It's probably not right.
I've heard some horror stories, so we could probably go on for an hour about stuff you've seen in that business, but we can put that on a shelf for the moment.
Yeah, it's over here. So I created and published my own card game. Woo, right here. And I have done a lot of work in the gaming industry, let's just say. And there's probably another 100 games up here in my head that I haven't written down. Just yesterday, I was teaching my son how to do storyboarding to describe the game that he wants to build. I've come at it from a user experience architecture kind of perspective now. I approach gaming completely different when it comes to the creation of a game than I do from the playing of a game. I think I'm a better player because of my understanding of what goes into the making of a game. But when it comes down to the differences between role-playing and the inflexibility, you have to understand that computers are very good at doing the same thing consistently. Humans are very bad at doing the same thing consistently. So when you talk about tabletop gaming, humans aren't going to do the same thing consistently day in and day out. I spent 3 years playing Risk with the same basically 10 people at Words Cafe where we first met, And you could tell the general strategies that every single one of them was going to bring to a specific game based on where they started, randomly selected on a board. And you would get a general idea of who was going to win in the first 10 minutes of the game. And that was a tabletop game. There was just enough chance when seeding the start of the game, but when you put players into it, you end up with the same kind of solution. When it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, you put people into similar situations, and people are going to make similar style choices. And when you add computers into that, it just kind of puts those people in a situation where they're left with fewer choices. And so the choices that they do make are definitely going to be the same. Now they've started putting things in more sandbox mode or open world mode where you can do different things like Minecraft, for example. You can do 100,000 million different things that you want as long as you're willing to put the time into it.
But
still, it's all bound by a certain set of rules, and a lot of it starts to become kind of repetitive. If you start watching enough YouTube videos about things that people have built in Minecraft, you'll start to see certain trends that people have all gone and built some kind of a Rube Goldberg machine, you know?
Do you perceive a time that we will build a DM who can be a DM?
No, I think humans are uniquely gifted in our capacity to do creative work. And computers are very good at doing repetitive work. Trying to bridge the gap, I don't think will happen, at least not in the next century. And I'm very pro-tech, and I've seen some really cool AI stuff happening in just the last year alone. Yeah, no, I don't think DM job will be replaced by a robot anytime soon.
So that might be the reason why every video game designer or pundit that I come across doesn't seem to even know that tabletop role-playing exists. Because there's no point. There's no reach around, so there's no point.
Well, maybe not a digital one. There's so many biases that people have. The inventor's bias probably being one of the least well-known amongst people who invent things, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, they're going to say, this tool that I'm using right now, this is the best tool for solving everyone's problem. I don't care what problem it is, I can use code to solve it. No, I'm not that kind of a developer. I'm entirely too salty. I've been around way too long. I know that you should never try to solve human resource problems with code. You end up with just a nightmare of code. Coming back around to the people who seem to think that video games will become more flexible and that AI is going to create some kind of a more immersive experience. They're right and they're wrong. They're right in the sense that it will be more immersive than what we have today. They're wrong in the sense that it won't be anywhere near as immersive as what you can do in a tabletop role-playing game. And if they haven't experienced that, or if they have, and they still have this opinion, then they haven't played with a decent DM. They've never done any improv theater training, which I would challenge every single one of you who's listening right now to do if you're going to play this game and learn how to role play and learn what that means. It's an incredibly powerful creative tool that I use in software all the time, every day.
Okay, well, I'd like to go back to a definition of play.
Yeah.
All right, I've been using a definition of play that's been around for a while. It was put forward by a fellow, and I can't remember his first name, but his name was Sweets, S-U-I-T-S.
Okay.
And the definition of play is basically that play is something that exists between rigid guidelines. So when you talk about, say, the play of your car's steering wheel, there is so far you can turn the steering wheel to the left or the right, and everything in between those 2 points is play. And play, even though it's, you can turn it this far and so on, there's also a different amount of play in every steering wheel of every car you will ever drive. Because you know that as you turn the wheel just a little bit, there are some cars that will respond and there are some cars that you have to wrench the wheel around tremendously just to get the wheels to go. And it's often the age of the car or the make of the car or how well the car has been maintained or any number of other things. But that element of play between those 2 points and the amount of sensitivity in that play, that's the game in existence. It's not necessarily whether or not you're winning or losing. It's how much control can you have over the play of the game while the game is going on. So if you have a lot of control through role-playing, R-O-L-E, you have a lot of control through role-playing because of the words that you pick and so on, that might be because the DM you're playing with is very susceptible to anybody at the table who can talk well, or it might be because the fellow who's running the table might be sensitive enough that he recognizes tiny little nuances in what you say, and he can play off that and back and forth. So there's different levels of how much sensitivity to play there is there. Now, do you buy all that?
Yes.
So why is that sensitivity to play not enough in itself without it needing to be about accomplishing or succeeding at something?
So to use your example of steering on an automobile, consider that, some people will drive a Honda Civic that's 15 years old, and some people will pursue an entire lifetime career to drive Formula One race cars, where that play is constricted about this much. And as soon as they get just a little bit outside of it, they crash.
Right.
And the car explodes into 1,000 million pieces. And so the tighter that room for play gives, the closer to competition you try to get. And generally speaking, when people are trying to be competitive about their play, they know all of the rules, they know all the boundaries, and they know all the numbers, and they know all those engineering details, to continue with the analogy.
Competitive implies somebody else.
You can't go for a win without knowing that the opportunity for failure is there.
Well, okay, but you call it a win, but I'm suggesting that it's just the pleasure of driving the car at that speed on that track in that environment. Why not just that pleasure?
And how do you know you've improved?
You can sense your own improvement.
Well, you can sense it maybe, but nothing like having a hard statistic at the end of the day that shows that you just drove the fastest lap you've ever driven. We time pit crews even, like how fast can you go, how fast can you change the tires and refuel the vehicle?
You don't step back from a moment of producing code. I can see a guitar on your back wall. You don't step back from a moment of playing guitar where you realize you've just done something you've never done before.
Well, art is a bit different from engineering. When they cross, for example, the guitar that I have on the wall behind me was a gift. It's a Squier, not a Gibson. If there are any guitar players listening, I don't play to the degree where the difference in the type of guitar I own, this being like a $300 Squier versus a $1,100 Gibson Les Paul, for example, which would be, I would love one. Well, it's not going to change how badly I play,
You'd love one, but not because it would make you a better player.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to happen. I don't compete when I play.
But you know what you're capable of. Yes?
Yes.
So is role-playing different from art? Or is role-playing engineering?
It's a little bit of both.
Well, certainly, I spend a lot of time doing design, so it has that element. But I could argue that the design that I'm doing for role-playing is similar to the design I do if I'm writing a piece of fiction.
Well, you're going to create challenges for the party that are running through a particular campaign, and those challenges are certain milestones that you need to accomplish in order to get through that particular scenario, to meet the challenge, as it were. And as you accomplish those different milestones, and as you beat the bad guy, or you succeed in negotiating something with a prince of Latvia or something, then maybe there's an opportunity in there where you can see some measure of progression, not only for you but for your character.
But
and that's outside of the statistics. Yeah, that's outside of the numbers. I mean, you can go from level 9 to level 10, let's say. That's your character progression. That's the engineering progression. But as a player,
if I want to start a farm as a player, and I don't want to go off and kill monsters, but I do want my DM to create scenarios for me so that the feeling of running a farm gives me the esoteric pleasure of raising crops and selling crops. Not necessarily saying this would be a fulfilling a game. But with the right DM, this might be an amazing game. There are certainly games out there that give you the esoteric pleasure of growing things on a farm.
There's a game out there called Goat Simulator. Okay?
I've heard of that.
There's a game out there for everyone. And I am sure there's somebody out there who's listening to this right now who's thinking, see, I proposed that to my DM and he wouldn't let me do it. And I'm like, well, if that's what you're into, go for it. If that's how you're going to feel fulfilled, then go for it. But there's got to be some kind of gauge as to whether or not you're feeling fulfilled. I guess your point is, why does there have to be a gauge? If you're feeling fulfilled, and isn't that enough?
Your sense of wanting to have fun when you play the game, and your sense of wanting that fun to be fulfilling or whatever, is to get away from the win. And that's how you think of it. The last year I've spent a lot of time rethinking this whole structure, and I love to come back to golf, because golf is a horrible game. You and we once played a drunk round of golf.
Yeah, I was spectacularly drunk, I believe.
We were so drunk we were turning corners and falling out of the car.
Yeah.
Because we were not enjoying the company, and we had given up any hope of playing well.
Somebody was keeping score, but it wasn't me, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't you.
Golf is an incredibly difficult game. You have to wonder why anyone plays a game where you are basically destined to lose. Okay? You can make your high score, right? You can have your amazing day of golf, and you can make your score of, I'll just pick a number out, right? Of 104 that you scored on the course. And then you can play golf for years and years and years and years and never come close to 104. So you never have that feeling that you're going to improve. And even as you're getting older and you're realizing, well, when I did that 104 or that 94 or 84, whatever the listener feels that number needs to be down to, I was a young man, and now I'm 56, and I'm never going to score 84 again, even if, But you still play golf. I mean, everybody I know who plays golf, they play golf. They never quit, even though they know it's never going to be better than it's been. So there has to be something about the fact that the game is just hard, and it's not fun.
I play golf for the same reasons. I play it casually, not competitively. I don't keep score. And while there was a time when I knew all the rules for golf inside and out, I no longer know the rules for golf inside and out. And I have to pick the people that I golf with, especially my cart mate, based on where they are. I have a friend who is very serious into golf, and he pretty much works 60 hours a week just so he can bank the time to take 2 months off in the summertime to go and golf all the time. And he'll do 2 rounds, 18 holes, that's 36 a day for like 2 months straight. And I don't think his handicap has improved in 4 years. I'm not sure there's much room for improvement with a guy who plays that much golf, to be honest with you. But I don't like to play golf with people who are that competitive at golf, because I'm an embarrassment to them. Everybody who knows them at the golf course are going to, like, who are these jokers that you're hanging out with over here, buddy? Like, I haven't been kicked off a golf course yet.
I was going to make the point that I think that the things that you find that are fun are what most people would normally associate as fun. And the things that I find that are fun are things that most people would normally associate with troublesome or frustrating or difficult or unrewarding. But I find them fun because I need to push myself against something which gives me an awful lot of resistance. If I'm not really dragging on the steering wheel to make the car turn, I'm getting nothing out of it. So it's not that we're both not playing the game for the sake of fun. It's just that we're playing for very different kinds of fun.
Okay. I can get behind that theory. I have different types of fun all the time. Not just in games, but in business as well. I once made the comment that, I'm an anarchist. If If I don't find it fun, then I'll blow it up because that'll be fun. So I'll go into a business meeting with a particularly onerous potential client, and I know that I don't want to bring them on as a client because they're going to be onerous clients, and that's just going to waste my time. It's going to waste their time. Neither one of us are going to come out of the experience with any value, and so I would prefer to just frankly walk away. And I don't even care about how much money it is at that particular point. I just don't want to have to deal with all of the bullshit. And so I will try and politely excuse myself, and if I can't, then I will blow it up, and I will have my fun that way, and I will watch them melt down and turn red and throw a temper tantrum in a boardroom. I would much rather see that and get my fun than try to win and get the client, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does make sense. It makes sense to a lot of people. The difference maybe is that you're conscious of that.
Yes.
Whereas an awful lot of people are destroying their careers and their jobs and their relationships and their family and themselves because they're not conscious of that compulsion to ruin anything that might make their lives better. You're not doing that, right? I mean, you're picking and choosing because you're doing this consciously. Okay. But of course, a lot of people out there, and I can think of myself when I was younger. I can think of lots of situations where I destroyed a job opportunity because I didn't want to do the job, but I wasn't conscious of the fact that I had destroyed that opportunity.
Yeah, it takes some wherewithal to get to the understanding of the situation that you find yourself in, as well as the meta of the situation that you find yourself in, and then going one step above that and understanding that you are deconstructing the meta of the situation that you find yourself in, all simultaneously while living the experience that you're currently having. And I wonder how much of that understanding came from the fact that I used to run Dungeons and Dragons, now that I think about it.
Well, I have been asking people through the podcast if they feel that Dungeons and Dragons has taught them anything, and people say yes and people say no. Do you think there's some special skills you have that come from playing D&D?
Creative problem solving, working with a team, even though that team is incredibly different. Swashbucklers and paladins should not be in the same party.
But you don't get that choices in real life sometimes.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I have drawn on a number of lessons that I have learned through role playing, not just in theater, and not just in writing screenplays and scripts and doing live comedy or improv or even performance art for that matter. The creative tool that is our brains needs to be worked out, just like a bodybuilder. And if you aren't constantly flexing and using those muscles to solve problems creatively, it will go away. And you will find yourself 65 years old, sitting in front of a TV, watching another black and white documentary on World War II and looking for something new.
You just described everybody on the internet. You just
described everybody.
The people who found this podcast.
I haven't watched them all, but
the internet has turned us all into people who do nothing but search for something that's new. Having come from the time when you watched whatever was next on the TV, or you spent time clicking from channel to channel hoping there was something on the TV because you were too tired or bored or unmotivated to get up and do anything else.
Yeah, any excuse to just sit and turn your brain off isn't bad. We need that little decompression time once in a while. We can't all be running around going, I need a creative problem to solve with my creative problem solving tools. No, we got to turn the brain off once in a while. We got to let it chill. We got to let it relax, but don't fall into the trap then of constantly turning your brain off all the time.
But now we hunt, right? Now we're hunters on the savannah, moving from web page to web page, flicking YouTube to YouTube, waiting for a dopamine rush when we turn on to something that tells us that we're having a good time now because we've watched the last. I don't want to give my age away, right? But we've watched the last science video that we can watch about how we're all going to die next week.
Oh, but next week there'll be a new one about how we're all going to live. And we'll tune in the week after that for the one that says we're all going to die.
And how good is it where you find somebody who's put up 20 or 30 or 40 videos that you can watch?
Yeah.
So that you can just sit and do that for a while.
Yeah. The hunting is over. It is occasionally, I don't know, I'm running an experiment similar to that right now on Facebook. So we'll see how that one goes.
I think there's a certain similarity to that. I mean, I've never been that person who had to go find a game. I was never that role player. I've never been in a situation where I had to find a game. I carried the game with me. I've had moments where I couldn't find players, but usually if I get two, I start to get more.
Usually when I find myself going back to university days, when I first went to university, I lost my static group. My second year of university, I lost my static group because I moved from my small town to the big city where university was, and everybody else was still in high school, so they were stuck back in small Townsville. I had nobody to play with at the university. I went to find players, and University of Calgary, Gauntlet, 3 lines free, trying to find players. It turned out I found a Masquerade game. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Seamus. Still friends of mine today. The interesting thing about trying to find players is an interim point. You read the books. You draw the maps. I spent a huge amount of time working on an entire world map, in fact, during my second year of university, while I was studying geography of all crazy things. And I went into, I wanted to really flesh it out in drawing different types of people and cultures. And I wanted to make sure that if there was a mountain over here, that the proper geography would be reflected by the streams and the rivers running in the same way, and that the local geography where it would build lakes was appropriately functional. And I spent a lot of time learning the actual geography while building this map, and it became an excuse to create a bridge between the formal education that I was receiving in physical geography at the University of Calgary and building a fantasy world at the same time. So coming back to the other question of did I learn anything from D&D? I don't know, but it sure allowed me to flex the understanding and learning that I was getting professionally.
The metagame of working on your world, right?
Yeah.
Which I play tremendously. I mean, the process of me working on my game is a huge... It's not a drag on my time, but it's what I choose to spend a lot of my time doing.
Yeah.
Is not that different from the metagame that you were talking about earlier with programming.
Nope.
And you said it would be more fun to make a game than to play a game.
Yep.
So you're a pretty bright guy. I mean, I think people are going to agree that
thanks.
You've got your head on your shoulders, and that even if you have been out of the game for a while, you have some you have some worthy positions and opinions, and you're a game designer and so on. Instead of playing role-playing games, why don't you talk about how to design them?
You know, I think there's a point at which we all need to teach what we know, because there is no other way for us to truly know that we know it. There's no other true way to know something until you've taught it. Surgeons are like this, right? See one, do one, teach one is their philosophy. So at some point, going back a long ways, I've always made a point of teaching what I know. So when I first got into gaming and I had published my book, I did spend time online, or this is early blog days, talking about what it was like to build a game and some of the things that I talked about. I did write a number of articles specifically on geography and map making in D&D. We've talked about it a couple of times. And at that time, I was teaching that stuff, but I was learning web development codes. This is 1993. I was learning CSS, HTML, PHP, JavaScript, all the things that would eventually become my future career path. But before I actually took that step, I had been writing code and working with it for about 5 years, and I wrote a book teaching people how to do this stuff. It got downloaded over 500,000 times, and it was translated into 4 different languages, and it was a free book that I put online for free to teach. And boy, I tell you, when you are sitting there in a job interview, and this would have been my first job interview, looking for a job, and you tell them that you wrote the book on the particular piece of software that they are asking you to write code against, and not just like, oh yeah, I wrote the book on it, but literally wrote the book, you get the job. And so I got that job, and that led to another job. And then the combination of knowing how to write code and having a background in physical geography, GIS, satellite imagery, remote sensing, interpretation, that got me a gig implementing Google Maps on websites, which led to another gig implementing Google Maps on websites. And so my entire career, and even to this day, I'm still being asked, hey, can you come and implement Google Maps on our website? Like, do you really want me to do that?
Because lots of people can.
Lots of people can do it, and they can do it cheaper than I can do it.
One of the themes of this series of podcasts has been, how would you teach D&D, and ought we to teach D&D, and who deserves to be able to teach D&D?
There's two types of people who teach things: those who don't know anything but think they do.
Well, we don't care about them. They're already online. Yeah. There's lots and lots of them.
Yeah, you gotta be careful, but there'll be a lot of people who will eat that shit up anyways. And then there's the people who really know what they're doing, but don't know how to teach. And those are kind of a sad story, because, I mean, we can practice this game all we want, but at the end of the day, if we're not going to put the time in to learn how to teach it, then that is going to be sad. So you're asking me how I would go about teaching. And number one, first of all, I would study how people learn, because I've already discovered that not everybody learns the same way. And having had a number of junior developers below me that I completely failed at teaching, because I teach a certain way and they learn a certain way. And if they don't mix, there's no teaching and there's no learning that's happening. So
I see that as the problem that's solved there is we have a lot of different kinds of teachers. I mean, that's not a different problem from education entirely. Education right now is in a quandary where they're finding that different teachers teach different classes of students at a different rate, and there's no way to gauge how well a teacher can be, because depending on what the people in his class or her class are going to be this year is how well the teacher does. There's no consistency.
No, and it's incredibly challenging. But if there's 6 different styles of teaching and 4 different styles of learning, and you, as the teacher, then you need to become the expert in different styles of teaching to match the people that you're trying to learn. What you're doing right here with this podcast is teaching. You're just teaching it in a different method than what you use on your blog.
Right.
And even then, there's experiential learners who can't learn from your blog or from these videos. They need to actually be sitting at a table playing. And I think you answer to that style of learning with your online game as well, right?
I try to do that through the online game. There's the book that I've written. There's the podcast that I'm trying to do now, and I don't plan to make every season on the podcast the same kind of agenda. There's any number of questions that I answer often online and so on as best I can. There's a constant stream of trying to make people better players. That's basically my agenda all the time. But that's always been my agenda as a writer, is that I think writing is about teaching people.
Yeah, and you'll approach the topic of teaching from that perspective. My perspective in the past had always been similar. I would write, and I would expect people to learn from reading. At the same time, a very experiential learner. I'm the type of person who can't just go and RTFM. And as a developer, that might sound weird, but I need to actually have a problem that I need to solve with this particular programming language and tool set that I can then apply myself and learn as I go. And it's usually not until I'm about 3/4 of the way through my learning project that I will actually go back and read the manual and try to read the documentation so that I have the functional understanding of what it is that I was doing, and I will compare that against what I actually read. I'm an experiential learner, but I'm not necessarily an experiential teacher. I pretty much suck at that part of teaching. That particular style is not for me. Much better at writing, and much better at talking, and much better at doing presentations. I can handle a workshop. I've done one. I did a 5-day workshop for some startups back here back in late November, and it worked out really well. We got rated really high from all participants, and so I succeeded. But it's not my preferred style of education. So if I was going to teach Dungeons and Dragons, I would probably appeal to a similar audience. I would probably take a similar approach to you, and I would probably be spending most of my time writing. Whereas I think role-playing is a very functional thing, and I think there should be some experiential element to it. And I think if you're going to do this, that you need to have a group of people that you can learn with, and those people need to create a safe environment where people feel they can take a risk, whether it's safe to fail, where you can be wrong about something without some competitive douchebag like me coming back and saying, no. It says on page 64 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, in the third paragraph from the top.
You'd be really surprised at how you don't run into those people. When I was doing cons and I was talking to people at tables, I met maybe 2 people who were hardcore like that the whole time that I was there. Most of the people that I met, and when I say most, I mean like, I met hundreds of people, and all except 2 just want to know what to do. That's all that is their entire agenda. Tell us what to do. And if you had a guy like that, and it would have to be a guy, because the way women approach the game is completely different from the way that men approach the game. But if you had that guy in a classroom or some such, then you could just bus him. Just the same way you would bus anybody in a classroom who stood up and challenged what the teacher knew.
I have no problem with people knowing more than me. I have a problem with the way some people believe being right is more important than being kind. I'm a really smart guy. You're a really smart guy, and I've been around a lot of really smart people, specifically in the software world. When they are right, some of them will let you know, and not in very kind ways, let me tell you. But if you're going to go and you're going to learn how to do something new, you need to do that in a safe space where you can make the mistakes, because in making those mistakes, you learn. Learning what to do is important, but learning what not to do is important as well.
Well, if somebody wants to fund me, I'm more than happy to go from city to city and do a 2-day workshop on role-playing that happens in an environment that is not connected to an expo. So it won't pull together like the kind of people that would be most, I'd be happy to do that. That'd be a dream job.
Yeah.
And I just do 2 days of teaching people and putting them in an experiential situation, do 2 hours of talk, and then start dividing them up into different groups and getting different ones to DM and keep moving them around. And I would just keep moving around the table, and hopefully I'd have 2 or 3 other people after a while that would help me do that. And that would just be fantastic. But I would charge huge amounts of money for that.
It's a good way to make some money. Speaking from experience, this is part of what I do now. And I love it. And
no one takes it seriously, though, right? What you're doing, people take seriously.
More and more every day. So there's this opportunity to teach people who don't know things. And this is the weirdest thing about teaching. And this is going to definitely apply to D&D and what you just said. At least 90% of what you know, somebody else doesn't already know. But you think, I don't know that much. And the imposter syndrome kicks in. And you think, I don't know enough to teach people. And you could be playing this game for 10 years with your static group and have solved a number of different problems and worked through a number of different scenarios that other people have never even dreamed of. And you'll sit across from somebody in a convention or whatever, and you'll be talking about, I ran into this problem. What was it? Joey keeps saying he's going to show up, and so we don't invite Steve because Steve and Joey aren't friends. But then Joey actually never shows up and wouldn't you know, like 2-minute conversation at a con with somebody who's already been through that exact same experience.
And they answer your question.
Yeah.
It's supposed to happen online, but all you have is Reddit. And everyone on Reddit is crazy.
Just the vocal ones. Just the vocal ones. Yeah. There's 100,000 people out there. What it's Sunday night, right? So there's probably 100,000 tables of D&D being played right now around the world. And you know something that they don't know. And you can share it and you can teach it. One of the coolest things, when a new piece of a new programming language comes out is we don't have anybody to teach what it is. When the Go programming language was first released, we had 4 people who had developed the language themselves, who were trying their best to teach. but they had to develop the language, and they couldn't just teach. And so we had this wonderful little community that popped up around, I tried this and it didn't work. And people would be like, oh, well, why didn't it work? I wonder why it didn't work. And then like 3 weeks later, somebody will pop in on that particular channel on Reddit or whatever, and it'll be like, oh, I tried that too. Did you ever figure out why it didn't work? And sooner or later, you have all these people who have no idea why their code isn't working. This is just the first step of understanding.
That never happens. It doesn't. It doesn't in the role-playing group.
It happens early. Well, this is a long-standing community and a long-standing game. You have a number of people who are. It's a very different experience when you're the first one in, and there's only 12 of you in the entire world who work with this particular tool. I've got a game here. Only 48 people have played this game.
And then it's a smaller community, and you don't have the politics and the official game dogma that tells everybody what to think already. That's why it's difficult on Reddit, is because the WOTC has already issued an answer to every question that they've run across. And it's almost invariably the worst answer imaginable. And if you ask a question, you get the WTC answer from 55,000 people who just dump on you until you go, I have to fall in line and do what everybody else says, even though I know this doesn't work.
Yeah. Every community that you can have an opinion about. And this is true in gaming, any single game you want. It's true in art. It's true in authorship. It's true in writing. It's true in software. I have never been a helicopter pilot, but I'll bet you that there are topics that helicopter pilots will argue on Reddit over and over and over and over again, and that the manufacturer of Bell helicopters provided an answer 26 years ago that may not be the correct answer, but it was the safe answer. So,
thank God Bell Helicopters is not the only helicopter maker in the entire world. You have at least somebody else making helicopters who has a different opinion, who maybe doesn't agree with their competition.
That's true.
The WOTC doesn't have a competition. That's the sadness. I've gotta bring this back because I always want to bitch about the WOTC. There's nothing else that I like better. The other point that I've been making on this podcast, and this will probably be the last question that we deal with, is that I've been arguing that people, when they give advice about how to play role playing, and this is all role playing, that they rush to the solution before they investigate the problem. So somebody says, my players don't like dying, and somebody says, oh, well, if your players don't like dying, just make sure they never die and everything's fine. And there's no investigation as to why the players don't like dying or what the details are about that, and we just rush immediately to having some kind of a solution for the problem.
Everyone does it, not just in D&D. Every sport imaginable, every coach you've ever seen. I had a business coach do something similar to me recently, and it was not a pleasant experience, let me tell you. But you can come through and you can try to identify how your problem is just like the problem I had. And for my problem, and now I get to talk about my problem, and I also get to tell you about the solution that I did, and so I get to talk about me. And I'm not talking about you anymore, and now we've just completely derailed. So there's this wonderful book called Humble Consulting that I read that talks about trying to just embrace your curiosity about the problem that people are having. Maybe I'm getting a little bit distracted here. As a community, if we can first be curious about what this problem is, and less self-involved and self-focused and process-driven, because some people think that solving problems can be a process, and I totally disagree with that. But if we just let our curiosity, and I think we're generally curious people to begin with as a species. We're definitely the only curious, right? I mean, cats and then humans. There's,
Yeah.
So I think if we just let ourselves be a little bit more curious and start by asking questions, whatever the first question comes to mind, my players don't like dying all the time. It's like, well, what do you mean by all the time would be my first question. How often are they dying? Are they dying 3-4 times a night? Like, maybe it's not a problem.
How much do they not like it?
How much do they not like it?
You'd expect them to not like it, but is it actually a problem?
Are they stupid? Like, how dumb are your players? Like, is this their first game? Like, I don't know. I have so much curiosity around that particular question. But then I'm the guy who spent 2 hours making my very first character ever, who got begged my friend's older brother to be our DM for our game. And then he killed us in the first 5 minutes of the game that we played. So I have some empathy here as well as curiosity. I don't know.
Well, maybe you caught me out. Maybe it is the engineer in me. I see medicine as a kind of an engineering. That, to me, when you have a problem, you deal with it the way that medicine deals with it, or the way that engineering deals with it. If the bridge looks like it's going to fall down, you don't just rush right out there and slap concrete on it and say, there, it's fine, and go away. You spend time investigating exactly to the nth degree why this bridge is falling, and you do everything necessary so you understand the problem in its entirety before you try to produce a solution for it. Medicine's the same way. We had a time when doctors would just try everything. We sort of started to move towards things that would consistently work even by the time of the Romans. So this is a very young game. All role-playing isn't no more than 40 years as a game. Then I think there's a lot of room to talk about just what's actually wrong without needing to produce a solution.
I work with startups now, software startups primarily. And a few of us, small margin of us, have this understanding that applies in this case. We refer to it as love the problem, not your solution. And so as a step into any community who is experiencing a problem, okay, well, let's love that problem. Let's embrace it. Let's get into it. Let's look at our problem like a Christmas dinner. Let's savor every single bite. Let's eat all of it that we possibly can. Let's get our fat problem-solving pants on. And let's go and devour this thing and figure out what this problem is, to borrow the phrase from soup to nuts, if you will, and figure out what it really is before we get into the solution, because the problem isn't going to change until our solution comes along. So let's love the problem, because it's not going to change. Our solution, on the other hand, is going to change constantly, all the time, and in some very drastic ways, until we figure out what this problem is really about. And that's good. But if you have that backwards, and you love the solution, what you're going to find is every new piece of evidence that you have that describes the problem needs to be argued. Every new idea that challenges your solution will need to be argued.
Yes.
And so your solution becomes this intractable thing, and you start listening to people in this world who say things like, don't give up, and then you sink $5 million into a piece of software without a single sale behind it. Or you sink $5 million into buying a product like WOTC, and you have to defend against every bad thing that everybody has ever said because you bought a solution for $5 million, and you're no longer loving the problem. And so, to wrap everything up, if I can, the same thing holds regardless of what it is. There is a problem. There's always a problem. Finding a solution requires loving that problem first.
I think that's terrifically eloquent.
Thanks.
No,
not my words.
Nevertheless, it's something that I haven't thought of. It's something that I haven't heard, and you just put me in mind that maybe I should get off the WOTC's. Maybe I should get off the WOTC's ass, because you just put me in mind of something. Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And when they bought Wizards of the Coast, they probably didn't realize the nightmare of a marketing problem that they had bought when they bought Wizards of the Coast. They probably had no idea that they were going to be on the hook for everything that Gygax had said, going all the way back to 1974. That they were a bunch of latecomers, and they had no idea that all of this entire conversation was now going to be put on their plate. And maybe the dogma from the last bunch of time has been Hasbro desperately trying to backpedal from this horror show of a PR problem without really knowing how to backpedal, and that we're just watching one long, disastrous shit show. And that maybe I should get off the WOTC's ass, because maybe they really just don't know what to do about it.
Well, not only that, well, yeah.
Of course, I want them to just sell the
Serious
WOTC for parts and just make it go away. I mean, that's what I want.
Well, first they have to make the money back that they spent on buying the company. And then
they need to realize that's never
selling it for parts. By the way, if they're listening, I'd like to offer $5. And I think let me check my pocket.
I can tell you they're listening because Mike Merles, who is the head of R&D for the WOTC, follows me on Twitter.
Oh, good.
I don't know why he follows me on Twitter, but he does.
Man, maybe he's like me and he follows people on Twitter, but he only actually checks his Twitter every 60 to 90 days.
I never check my Twitter. I just post on Twitter, and I see the notifications that come up to my posts. But I don't care what anybody else says on Twitter because it's 280 characters, and frankly, it's just boring. Too short, did not read.
Twitter to me is like a bunch of drunk people in a bar. You want a drink? Can I get you a drink? Just shouting.
On that note, I want to get out of this, I suppose. I want to thank you, Mike. I want to thank you for volunteering and for coming out. I think this has been great. I think you have a future in writing about role playing. Like I think you do. I think there's a book in you. It doesn't have to be big, but I think there's a book in you. You should give it a shot.
I will at some point.
My guest today has been Mike Borthwick. I'm Alexis Smolensk, and you've been listening to the Authentic Role Playing Podcast. Please use the subscriber button and subscribe. If you're looking for more advanced content about Dungeons & Dragons and how to run the game, please visit my blog at Tao of D&D, or buy my books, How to Run, an Advanced Guide to Managing Role-Playing Games, and The Dungeon's Front Door. Now, both of those are available on Amazon, iBooks, or Lulu. You can also visit my other blog, Tao's Masterclass, for point-by-point recommendations on how to be a better Dungeon Master. You can find links for all of this content in the description below. So I wish you the very best for your campaign, and learn to love the problem, and keep reading, keep working on your world, and we will make better role-playing every day.